Okay, so here we are. Everything's nice and neat and trimmed up. And I've taken all the pins out of it. And so I am ready for my next step. We're still down here on the bottom. So we just did this part. Now we're ready for this make the outer bag. So it says place outer bag right side up on the work surface. So that's where we are. And it says center and cut a notch from each side of row 3. That's 6.5 inches by 3 3/4 inches. And it shows you a picture of what we're measuring and doing here. Now, that's a little tricky for students to understand. So I have this little cheat sheet for you. It tells you you're going to cut this out. It's 6.5 by 3 3/4. And it says bottom of row 3. So we're going to take this 1, 2, 3. I'm going to put it here. I suggest doing this on the wrong side of your project. So I'm going to just go ahead and flip mine over now to do this. And we're going to line this up here. I'm going to trace around it with my pencil. Let me find my pencil. And then go ahead and cut it out. So we're just gonna kind of center it right on that one and trace around. And then do the same thing to this side over here. Center and trace. Okay. Once you've done both, you're gonna go ahead and cut these out. So I cut out my one side. I'm cutting out my other side here. And this is going to help us box the bottom eventually, but we're just cutting it for now so it's set up and ready to go. Okay, so it's going to look a little something like this. That matches the picture. So now we're ready for this next step down here. Don't skip it. It's one quick sentence, but it's important. It says with RST, so right sides together, stitch the side seams using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So when we go to sew, we're using a 1/2 inch seam. Leave a 3/4 inch opening along each side seam, starting 1 3/8 inch, and then it comes up here from the upper raw edge. When we go to sew it, it wants us to backstitch at the beginning and end. Okay, that was a lot of numbers, kind of confusing, but we're gonna fold our bag so it's gonna go from this to looking like this picture here, and then it wants us to do this measurement, and I'm gonna show you how to do that. So we're eventually going to sew. We're going to leave this little bit open, and then we're going to sew down. We're back stitching at each of these places where we start and stop. So I'm going to fold my bag right sides together. Okay. Make sure everything lines up. These seams are centered here. Everything's matched at the top. I made another little cheat sheet for you. Well, I didn't make it, but someone did, and it's genius. So it says this is the top, so we're going to put this end at the top. This is 1 3/8 inch. This is marked as 1/2, but I measured. It's actually 3/4 inch, so that's what we're going to leave open. So here we go. I'm going to set this at the top, and I am going to make a mark. So this is 1 3/8 inches from the top. I'm going to make a mark. 3/4 inch. I'm going to make another mark. I'm going to take it to the other side of my bag now and do the same thing. 1 3/8 inches from the top. 3/4 inch there. Make a mark. Now I'm going to pin the sides all the way down, and I'm going to sew up each of my side seams. I'm going to make it look just like this picture. I'm just doing straight. I'm not coming around this bottom corner. We're not sewing that. We're just sewing straight down this, leaving this open, and my seam allowance is a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'll show you how I do this at the machine. Okay, here we are. I'm lined up with the second line for my 1/2 inch seam, and I'm getting ready to just sew straight down to my first pencil mark and leave that open. So let me make sure my machine settings are back to straight stitch. Okay, so I'm going to sew forward, then I'm going to back stitch. I'm going to go ahead and sew. Take out my pins as I go. All right, I'm at my line, so I'm going to back stitch. And then I'm just going to raise my needle up. I'm going to skip that opening. I'm just kind of stretching it. Putting this back down. Is my hand in the way? Did you see that? I stopped here. I just kind of pulled it forward. Set it here. I'm lined up with my second line. I'm going to go ahead and sew forward, back stitch, and I'm sewing forward all the way down now. And pretty simple. So I'm going to go all the way down. My camera's on my bag here, so I can't sew. When I get to the end down here, I'm going to back stitch, and I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. I made it to the end, back stitch, done. So now I can clip my threads here, where I left that open, and you'll see we have an opening for your drawstring for later now, okay? So now just do that same thing to the other side, leave it open where you have your pencil marks, back stitch here, leave open, back stitch, and back stitch down at the end.